War has always been one of the most defining and destructive forces in human history, shaping borders, nations, cultures, and the lives of countless individuals across centuries. And although humanity continues to advance in science, technology, and philosophy, the shadow of war follows every step forward, stretching across generations like an echo that refuses to fade. War is born from conflict, from the clash of ideologies, from the hunger for power, from fear, from pride, from misunderstanding, and often from the inability of leaders to resolve their differences through dialogue. And when war begins, it consumes everything in its path. Cities reduced to ashes, families torn apart, dreams shattered, futures rewritten, and entire civilizations altered forever, leaving behind scars not only on land and bodies, but on hearts and souls. Because war does not simply kill soldiers on the battlefield, it destroys the innocence of children who grow up hearing explosions instead of lullabies. It crushes mothers who wait for sons who never return. It haunts fathers who must carry the guilt of survival, and it weighs heavily on the shoulders of survivors who spend the rest of their lives trying to rebuild what was lost. And as we look across the history of war, from ancient battles fought with swords and shields to modern conflicts driven by drones, cyber attacks, and nuclear threats, one thing remains unchanged: the human cost, an immeasurable currency of suffering, grief, hope, determination, and resilience. For every war is the story of people, ordinary individuals caught in extraordinary circumstances who find themselves standing between life and death, fear and courage, despair and persistence. And although war is often described in terms of victories, losses, strategic gains, and geopolitical outcomes, the true story of war unfolds in the hearts of the people who live through it, whose names rarely appear in history books, whose sacrifices rarely receive recognition, yet whose suffering forms the true foundation upon which the story of conflict is built. And when war breaks out, it spreads like fire through dry grass, consuming everything it touches, leaving behind smoke that lingers long after the flames die out. Because even when the weapons fall silent, the echoes of war continue. Echoes in the memories of traumatized survivors, echoes in the broken economy, echoes in the ruined landscape, echoes in the political tensions that linger for decades, and echoes in the inherited trauma passed down to children who were not even born when the conflict began. For war is not a moment in time, it is a chain reaction of consequences that continue shaping the world in ways that cannot be undone. And despite the massive destruction caused by war, humanity continues to face it again and again, perhaps because human nature is complex, driven by ambition, competition, fear, and a desire for control, or perhaps because societies fail to learn from the past, repeating mistakes that ancient civilizations made thousands of years ago. But even in the darkest moments of war, one finds stories of bravery, compassion, sacrifice, and unity. Stories of people who risk their lives to save strangers, of communities who share their last piece of bread with refugees, of doctors who work without rest, of soldiers who choose humanity over violence, and of individuals who stand against injustice, even when the cost is their own life. For war reveals not only the worst of humanity, but also the best, showing that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And in many ways, war forces people to confront their deepest values, pushing them to redefine what truly matters: family, freedom, dignity, survival, and hope. And although war destroys, it also transforms, reshaping individuals and nations in ways they could never have imagined, leaving behind stories of loss, but also stories of rebuilding. For when the dust settles and the smoke clears, people always rise from the rubble, determined to rebuild their homes, their communities, and their lives, proving that even the fiercest destruction cannot extinguish the human spirit. And yet, as we progress into the modern era, the nature of war has evolved dramatically, no longer limited to traditional battlefields, but extending into cyberspace, economic warfare, information manipulation, and psychological operations where entire nations can be destabilized without a single bullet being fired. And this new form of warfare, more silent and invisible, yet deeply destructive, demonstrates that conflict is not always visible. It lives in the decisions of governments, the tension in diplomatic negotiations, the propaganda that shapes minds, and the technologies that can cripple infrastructures within minutes. And yet the consequences remain the same: fear, uncertainty, instability, and suffering. For ordinary people who are rarely responsible for the decisions that lead to war, but who always bear the greatest burden of its impact, creating a tragic imbalance that has existed throughout history, an imbalance where the powerful initiate conflicts while the powerless suffer from them. And as we continue to examine the role of war in shaping societies,
it becomes clear that war is not simply a physical battle, it is a battle of narratives, beliefs, identities, and interpretations of justice, where each side believes they are right, each side believes they are fighting for a noble cause, and each side believes that victory will bring peace. Yet the reality is far more complex, because victory does not guarantee peace, and peace does not erase trauma, and trauma often becomes the seed for future conflicts, creating a cycle that continues generation after generation unless humanity learns to break it, a task that requires wisdom, empathy, and diplomacy rather than force. And although the world has witnessed countless treaties, peace agreements, and negotiations, many of these attempts fail because they address the symptoms of conflict rather than the root causes: inequality, injustice, oppression, fear, discrimination, and the struggle for identity and belonging. And until these underlying issues are resolved, war will always remain a possibility, lurking beneath the surface of society like a dormant volcano waiting to erupt.